So if you're a CEO, maybe you felt this. That point where your company's growing and it feels less like that nimble startup and maybe more like this big ship you're just struggling to keep on course.
Yeah, getting swamped in the day-to-day.
Exactly. And that vision, the big idea that started it all, kind of gets lost. What if there was a way to, manage that chaos, maybe even use that energy?
Well, that often comes in the shape of a really strong second in command. Usually that's a chief operating officer, a COO.
Right.
And this deep dive, it's based on Cameron Herold's book, The Second in Command. And it's really your shortcut to figuring out how that role, that COO, can be the thing that pushes your company forward.
And we know you're here because you want to learn, but efficiently, right? You don't want to feel overwhelmed. So our mission here is to really boil down the key stuff about why a COO matters strategically and, well, the surprising number of ways they can help a company win.
I'm trying to cut through the noise, give you insights you can actually, use.
Yeah, actionable stuff.
Exactly. We'll break down what a COO actually does, why getting the right one is so, so important.
And the risks if you get it wrong.
Oh, definitely. And the pitfalls of a mismatch. Plus, we'll look at the different kinds of COOs out there because it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all kind of role.
Okay, let's jump right in then. What are the basic things a COO handles? Why should a CEO who's already busy even think about adding this layer?
Well, the core idea, really, is that the COO complements the CEO. It's about building this powerful two-in-a-box dynamic.
Two in a box.
Yeah, where their combined strengths just multiply the leadership's effectiveness. Think of it like a force multiplier for the whole company.
Okay, so creating balance. So the CEO isn't stretched thin trying to do everything, but you really stressed getting the right COO. What happens if you mess that up?
Herold is pretty clear on this. He argues the wrong COO can actually do more harm than having no COO at all.
Wow, really?
Yeah. A bad fit can kill momentum, create friction inside the team, and, well, ultimately just hold the company back. That's why really understanding your own needs as CEO and the company's specific challenges, that's got to be step one.
The book has praise from leaders who've, made this work. Got an example of a partnership that really shows that impact.
Absolutely. Brian Scudamore, he's the founder of 1-800-JAKE-OT-J-YANK.
Yeah.
And O2E Brands, he gives huge credit to his former COO, Eric Church.
Okay.
He basically says Church was key in scaling them from like $100 million to over $600 million, aiming for $1 billion. But Scudamore also makes a really interesting point.
That's that.
He points out that the right person at the right time, aligned with where the company's going, that's the key. And interestingly, his first COO, who's actually Cameron Herold, the author.
Served the book, right?
Well, Herold was great initially. He maybe wasn't the perfect person for that next phase of massive growth. So the big takeaway is that needs change. The company evolves, and the ideal COO profile might evolve right along with it.
That's a really crucial point. The ideal partner isn't static. So when we say COO, it sounds like it's kind of a catch-all term for different roles.
That's exactly right. Herold clarifies that COO is often used as an umbrella term, for senior leaders who are essentially second in command, focused on operations.
So what other titles might you see?
Oh, you might see president, VP of operations, general manager, director of operations. It often depends on the company's size, its structure. But the core function, the strategic impact, that's what really matters, not just the title.
Okay, so not a rigid template. Let's talk about these different types of COOs the book lays out.
Yeah, Herold really hammers home how flexible the role is, unlike maybe, a CFO or a CTO role, which can be more defined. One major type he discusses is the other half COO.
The other half, like yin and yang.
Sort of. The key idea is finding someone whose strengths directly balance out the CEO's weaknesses. So maybe you have a really visionary, outward-facing CEO.
The ideas person, the face of the company.
Exactly. They might thrive with a COO who's more detail-oriented, more inward-facing, someone who just excels at execution, putting processes in place. It's about creating that synergy.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What are some other ways this role shows up?
Another really important one is the change agent, COO.
Okay. Sounds disruptive.
In a good way, hopefully. The insight here is that sometimes you need external help to drive internal change, especially if things are stuck. These COOs are brought in specifically to lead big shifts like going global, handling a merger, or a major strategy pivot.
Why an outsider sometimes?
Well, often their outsider view helps cut through that we've always done it this way, resistance. Herold uses this funny analogy like how teenagers sometimes listen more to an uncle than their own parents.
Okay, I get that. Someone to shake things up constructively. What if the founder is brilliant technically, but maybe lacks the business basics?
Ah, that's where the mentor COO comes in. And the key takeaway here, especially for tech companies, is you probably want someone with direct industry experience.
Right.
This type is super common in tech. You get these brilliant founders, but they need guidance on, building teams, sales, marketing, HR stuff. The classic example everyone points to is Sheryl Sandberg and Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook.
Yeah, that's a famous one. Someone who's been there, done that, and can guide them. Are there COOs who might be, like, training for the top job?
Yes, that's the heir apparent COO. They're brought in with the clear potential to maybe take over from the CEO down the road.
So, succession planning built in?
Kind of. The idea is it allows for a gradual handover and a chance to see their leadership skills in action. But Herold notes succession is definitely not guaranteed. He mentions examples like at Continental Airlines and Scribe Media where it happened, but it's not always the outcome.
Good clarification. What about someone who just shines internally and rises up?
That's your MVP, COO. The key insight here is recognizing and promoting your proven internal stars. This is someone already inside the company who's just been knocking it out of the park in operational roles.
So, promoting from within.
Exactly. It can be a massive morale booster, leverages their deep knowledge, and reinforces the culture. Harley Finkelstein becoming COO at Shopify is a great example of someone who really embodied the company and earned that spot.
Okay. And what about the adult in the room, COO? Is that still a thing?
It used to be more common, especially maybe in the early tech days. You had founders who were deeply technical but maybe didn't have broad business experience.
Right.
That dynamic seems to have shifted a bit. Now you often find business folks are more tech savvy, and many tech founders have better business sense from the get-go. So the role is less about supervision now and more about that strategic partnership. The archetypes kind of evolved.
Interesting how things change. Any other distinct types we should know?
Definitely. There's the follower, COO. This person is fantastic at taking the CEO's vision and just meticulously making it happen. Really effective, especially maybe in smaller founder-led companies.
The implement.
Precisely. And then, on the flip side, you have the devil's advocate, COO. This is often an external hire brought in specifically to challenge the way things are done, inject new ideas.
Sounds tricky.
It requires serious people skills, right? You have to challenge constructively without just creating conflict.
Wow. Okay. So it really depends heavily on context. The CEO style, where the company is at, what it needs most right then. A totally different type of COO could be the perfect fit at different times.
Exactly. So now that we've seen the different shapes this role can take, maybe we should dive into the core responsibilities and skills that generally define it.
Yeah, let's do that. What are the main duties? What's usually on a COO's plate?
Okay, fundamentally, the COO's job is to take the CEO's big vision and translate it into workable strategies and then make sure they get executed, flawlessly.
Vision to reality.
Exactly. Herold talks about the visionary integrator model. This is especially useful for smaller companies. The CEO focuses on culture, the long-term vision, the direction.
The what and why.
Right. And the COO then takes charge of implementing the systems, the processes, the operations needed to actually make that vision happen. The how.
So CEO points the way, COO builds the road and makes sure the car runs smoothly.
That's a good way to put it. And beyond that, the COO often acts as this crucial moderator and enforcer on the leadership team.
What does that involve?
Facilitating good communication, making sure everyone's aligned on what's important, helping the team reach consensus, solving problems together. It's not about picking sides, but about making the whole team work better.
Okay. And what skills does someone need to juggle all of that effectively?
Well, interestingly, a COO doesn't have to be the world's leading expert in every single part of the business, like finance or marketing.
Oh, okay.
But they absolutely must be able to understand and talk effectively across all those different departments. Herold says they need to speak many different languages.
Meaning they get the basics of finance, tech, sales, HR.
Exactly. Enough business sense to ask smart questions and understand the answers, even if they're not the specialist. They need that breadth.
So more like a conductor of an orchestra than the first violin in every section.
Perfect analogy, yes. They also need a really strong handle on systems and shortcuts to make things run efficiently.
Systems thinking.
Right. Herold tells this great story about the former president of Starbucks USA. He saw a burned out letter on a store sign.
Oh, okay.
And his first thought wasn't, why is that letter burned out? It was, what system can we put in place so this doesn't happen at any store?
Ah, I see. Thinking bigger picture, scalable solutions, not just fixing the one-off problem.
Precisely. That's the COO mindset.
That really clicks. What else is key?
Being able to switch gears, constantly toggling between the high-level strategy and the nitty-gritty operational details. That's vital. They need the big picture view, but also need to dive into execution without getting lost in the weeds.
That sounds like a tough balancing act.
It is. And finally, Herold really stresses that the COO is a major source of energy in the company. They play a huge role in shaping the culture actively, by design, not just letting it happen. Their drive, their optimism, it can really lift the whole organization.
Okay, wow. Strategic executor, communicator, systems thinker, culture shaper. That's a big role. How does a CEO figure out, okay, now is the time I need this person?
Herold suggests a really practical exercise. It's called the activity inventory.
Activity inventory.
Yeah. The CEO basically lists out all their regular tasks. Then they sort them into 4 buckets.
Okay, what are the buckets?
Incompetent things they hate doing and aren't good at. Competent stuff they can do okay, but just okay. Excellent things they're really good at, but don't necessarily love doing. And finally, unique ability.
Unique ability? That sounds like the sweet spot.
That's exactly it. Tasks they absolutely excel at and that give them energy.
So it's about the CEO getting brutally honest about where their time and energy actually go.
Precisely. Herold's point is that anything outside that unique ability zone actually drains the CEO's energy, and that holds the company back. So the inventory helps pinpoint those energy-draining tasks that could potentially be handed off to a second-in-command.
But is a COO always the first answer?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Herold advises looking at maybe less senior hires first. If the main bottleneck is just admin stuff, maybe a great executive assistant and EA is all you need right now.
Right.
Or if you're lacking specific expertise, say in finance or tech, maybe hiring a strong VP of finance or a CTO is the more targeted move first.
So don't jump straight to the COO hire. What are the signs that say, yes, we really do need that COO level?
You should only really consider a COO if they can clearly add significant value, like measurably making operations more efficient, boosting employee or customer happiness, really driving up the company's value, and improving profitability.
So a real ROI is expected.
Definitely. Herold talks about looking for at least a 2x return on the COO's total compensation, ideally aiming for 4x. It has to make financial sense and have a big positive impact across the board.
And how does the future play into this decision?
Herold really pushes CEOs to lean into the future. He says you should vividly imagine your company 3 years from now. What's the structure? How does it operate? What's the culture like?
Get a clear picture of the destination.
Exactly. Once you have that clarity, then you can figure out the specific skills, the experience, the leadership style you'll need in a second-in-command to actually get you there, to bridge that gap from today to tomorrow.
That's a really smart, strategic way to frame it. Hiring for the future, not just today's problems. Okay, so let's say a CEO does the homework, runs in the numbers, envisions the future, and decides, yes, I need a COO. How do they go about finding and hiring the right one?
Okay, the absolute first step, according to Herold, nail down your company's core values. Get crystal clear on them.
Why start there?
Because the ideal COO has to align with those values deeply. It's way easier to hire someone who already believes in your core principles than to try and change them later. That alignment is fundamental.
Values fit first.
Yeah.
Got it. Then, the actual search, do you look inside or outside the company?
Well, there are pros and cons both ways, right? Promoting internally can be great for morale, keeps institutional knowledge, leverages existing relationships.
Sure.
But the downside is you might limit your talent pool. You might miss out on someone external with more direct experience. External hires bring fresh eyes, maybe broader expertise. They can challenge the status quo.
But they have a learning curve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They need time to learn the history, the culture, the unwritten rules. Herold also makes this interesting point. COO skills don't always transfer well between different industries, but they often transfer quite well within the same industry.
Ah, that's a useful filter. Okay, what about the nuts and bolts of the search process?
For smaller companies, Herold suggests maybe using titles like Director or VP of Operations first. Calling someone COO too early might create mismatched expectations about pay and responsibility.
Manage expectations.
Right. But whatever title you use, the absolute key is creating a detailed scorecard.
Scorecard, like for performance.
Exactly. It needs to clearly spell out the top 5 things this new person must achieve in their first year to be considered a success. And this needs to be super specific to your company and your needs as CEO. You can get ideas from, say, the COO alliances 8 core areas: vision, strategy, people, meetings, financial skills, mentors, culture, but you have to tailor it.
So, super clear expectations, measurable from day one. What else helps attract the best people?
A really compelling job description is critical. It shouldn't just list duties. It needs to reflect the role's challenges, resonate with the kind of person you want, maybe even echo your own style as CEO.
Make it authentic.
Totally. And to find those A players, the ones who aren't even looking for a job. Using executive search firms can be really valuable. They're experts at, well, poaching top talent.
Headhunters.
Yeah. Also, networking is huge. Going to CEO events, joining mastermind groups, it's a great way to spot potential candidates, build what Herold calls a virtual bench of people you admire.
A virtual bench. I like that. Okay, you've got candidates. How do you interview effectively for such a key role?
Herold favors a pretty tough multi-stage process. He even suggests starting with candidates submitting a short video
A video? Why?
to explain why they think they're the right fit and how they see themselves contributing to the company's vision. It's like an early culture fit screen, even before you dig into resumes.
Interesting. Then what?
Then interviews involving not just the CEO, but maybe people who would report to the COO, even trusted advisors, and definitely a dedicated skills interview to really test their practical experience. If there are areas the CEO isn't an expert in, bring in people who are de-evaluator to help evaluate those skills accurately.
Makes sense. How do you really check if their track record is legit?
Herold is big on using top grading references and what he calls the threat of reference check, or TORC.
Threat of reference check. Sounds intimidating.
It's more about transparency. You ask the candidate for a long list of people they've worked with, bosses, peers, direct reports, not just the few curated references they offer initially.
Okay.
And you state up front that you might contact several people from that list. It encourages honesty and gives you much richer ground for asking probing questions about their actual performance, strengths, weaknesses.
Digging deeper than the polished references.
Exactly. But ultimately, Herold says the final call comes down to gut feel, to trust. If you don't fundamentally trust the person, don't make the offer. It's too big a risk.
Trust as the final gatekeeper. Absolutely crucial for that level of partnership. Okay, so you found the right person, you trust them, you make the offer. What about compensation and getting them started?
On compensation, Herold actually argues for a fair, competitive base salary for senior execs based on their responsibilities and track record. He's less keen on overly complex bonus structures.
Really? Why is that?
He believes truly top performers are often driven more intrinsically, focus on fair pay for the role. He mentions things like the COO Alliance Salary Survey as good benchmarks to understand what's competitive. The key is aligning title, responsibility, and pay with the company's current size and stage.
Fair salary first. Interesting. And onboarding. How do you set them up for success in those first few months?
A clear, structured 90-day plan is vital. Month 1 should be all about learning.
Just absorbing.
Yeah, immersing themselves, history, values, culture, team dynamics, the market, how to work best with the CEO and the team. Just listen and learn.
Okay, month 1, learn. Month 2.
Month 2, start identifying opportunities. Where can systems be improved? What processes need tweaking? Based on everything they learned in month 1.
And month 3.
Month 3 is when they can start carefully implementing some changes based on their observations, their insights, and importantly, the relationships they've started building. Herold really stresses, listen, observe, build trust before you start shaking things up.
Slow down to speed up later, kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He points to resources like the COO Alliance or COO coaching for ongoing support and development. The Alliance even have this bold 10x guarantee. They promise members will get at least 10 times their membership feedback and value.
Wow, confident. Okay, so they're onboarded. Let's talk about the ongoing relationship, that CEO-COO partnership. What makes it work long-term?
Communication is huge. Open, honest, transparent. Plus, a real commitment from both sides to learn from each other, and having really clearly defined roles and responsibilities is critical.
So you avoid stepping on each other's toes.
Precisely. Herold also says the CEO needs to actively shine a spotlight on the COO. Give them credit, reinforce their authority. Don't undermine them. It's a balance, too. The CEO needs to stay focused on the high-level stuff and really empower the COO to run operations and delegate effectively.
What happens when they disagree? Because that must happen, right? In any close partnership.
Oh, yeah. Herold sees healthy conflict as totally normal, even good, in a strong partnership. The absolute key is keeping it focused on the issue, not making it personal.
Attack the problem, not the person.
Exactly. And always resolve those disagreements privately. You don't want that conflict spilling out and affecting the rest of the team. He also warns about ego on both sides. Humility and focusing on the company's success over individual agendas are essential.
Ego is the enemy. And what if? What if it's just not working out? Or the company changes direction and the COO isn't the right fit anymore?
Herold actually uses his own story here. He talks about moving on from his COO role at 1-800-JOT Jane Drunk when the company's needs changed.
Oh, interesting.
His point is, the right COO for one stage of growth might not be the right one for the next, and that's okay. Sometimes it's necessary for a COO to move on when their skills don't match the company's new direction. He uses this analogy of a booster rocket. It gets you to a certain point, but you might need a different rocket to go higher.
That's a powerful and probably difficult realization.
For sure. But ultimately, this whole deep dive into the second-in-command really drives home just how valuable a well-chosen, well-integrated COO can be.
Hey.
It's so much more than just taking tasks off the CEO's plate.
Right.
It's really about creating this powerful leadership team, this alliance, that can truly unlock a company's potential for growth and making an impact.
Yeah, for me, a huge takeaway is just how nuanced this role is. It's not simple. Finding that right fit demands really honest self-assessment from the CEO's strengths, weaknesses, but also a super clear vision for where the company's actually going.
Absolutely. So as you're listening, maybe reflect on your own leadership. What are your unique abilities? Where could a really strategic second-in-command truly multiply your impact? And think about those archetypes we discussed the other half. The change agent, the mentor, heir apparent, MVP, even the devil's advocate. Which one, or maybe combination, might be the biggest help for where you are now or where you want to go?
That is a fantastic question to chew on. And if this has sparked something and you want to go deeper, definitely check out resources like the COO Alliance or just look into more on executive leadership development. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive.